Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Dearly beloved, we gather here today in order to remember, or rather forget, about yet another phony black media attempt trying to get you and me to think and say what the white media wants you and me to think and say. The real is real dead. Cancelled, not that anybody really noticed that it had been around. Fake black media takes a variety of forms. The goal is to present an ideology and thought process that perpetuates the status quo and to get us to aspire to it. So the white media puts some money behind something so that it looks glamorous. It looks flashy, so they make sure that there's lots of light on it and try to gussy it up as best they can. And you make sure you promote it so that people see it. Hopefully they'll look at it and it'll be interesting and enticing to them. This way, black people will notice it and find it attractive, but it always turns out to be poison in a candy coating. Now, as I've always taught you, the point of any media is to promote a value system. Nobody sets up some sort of media apparatus as a means to try to promote somebody else's interest. You do it because you're trying to promote your own. And media reflects the people who own it, what they want to see. Take The View, for example, created by Barbara Walters. It was meant as something to appeal to her fellow white baby boomer females coming out of the post-Oprah era. You have these baby boomer white women who could watch this show and they could see a panel of mostly white women with their one solitary black friend. A nice, controlled environment where nothing would be threatening or disturbing to them. But the goal was to take the kind of faux kumbaya spirit that Oprah Winfrey had made her fortune off of and to see if they were able to reverse engineer their own version of it. The View, of course, caught fire and it happened to find its audience and is still going today, however raggedly. But there were also other networks that noticed this exact same formula and they wanted to see if they could copy it for themselves. And so about a dozen years after The View, CBS launched their own show, calling it The Talk. It was basically a pet project for Les Moonves's little bop, Julie Chen. Now, the audience for The Talk was supposed to be Gen X white women, college-educated, hopefully. Their entire shtick was that this show was going to be for a younger crowd than The View. While the panel for The Talk may have been younger and somewhat more hip than The View, everything else about The Talk was recycled marketing from The View. It was basically the same thing, gussied up for women who were going to be moving into their middle-age years. And then, a few years after that, came The Real. This was meant to be a black female version of The View/Talk, but like all the rest of the phony black media, their mission was to get us to nod to whatever we were told. They were there to reinforce a pre-existing status quo that we were supposed to be persuaded to not disturb. And because The Real was created to support the white media's aims, they made sure that it was a showcase of anti-black tropes. The skin color hierarchy was, of course, present. You make sure that the women who are the most prominent on the show, certainly the ones who are cast in the most desirable light, are also the ones who are in relationships with white men, and the lighter their skin, the better. Naturally, the obese, dark-skinned black woman trope is there because we all know the darker a woman's skin is, the fatter a woman is. And what disgusts me about that is when you have these people like Star Jones and such and others, they know that what they're doing is perpetuating a dangerous stereotype about black women, but they'll sit there big as a house, just smiling, doing the mammy routine because, as they see it, they found themselves a safe place under white supremacy. They were able to get themselves a regular paycheck from the white media simply because they were fat and they would nod their heads with whatever their white co-host, actually white boss is more like it, says to them. And as far as they're concerned, hey, it's a paycheck, it's a living. That's fine with me. That's what they do. And it's the Cheryl Underwoods and the Sherry Shepherds and such. They just go right along with that mess. They're non-threatening to white women and they understand that that's their job. So you don't have to worry about Barbara Walters being angry at you or otherwise resentful. She sits beside you and she feels just fine because everybody looks better than whomever the standard sit-in token dark-skinned black woman is. That's the entire point. Or you got the racist spouses of these racist executives like Julie Chen. The white media has manufactured its own racial hierarchy of desirability, meant to convince everyone that white people in general and women in specific are some sort of standard of beauty. But of course, you can't have beauty at all unless you also have a standard for what is not beautiful. And so we see the constant hammering that black women are at the bottom of the beauty scale, with dark-skinned black women at the very bottom of that. This is not body positivity. It's sprinkling sugar on crap, but it reinforces exactly what a number of white viewers want to see. If you're a white woman sitting at home, and especially if you don't have yourself a man, well, you want something that you can feel better about yourself for, you can always go ahead and see this obese black woman sitting here acting as a happy, smiling flunky for Barbara Walters or Julie Chen, and you can feel better about that. Now, of course, there are going to be those who try to take the cop out and say, well, what about Rosie O'Donnell? She was a lard bucket, right? So it's not racial. They never have a show where there's just one and only one representation of a white woman. They don't just have it where there's just this one obese white woman and she's the only representation of a white woman. Forget it. They're not going to do that. They don't just have balance when it comes to white women. They make sure that the standard view of a white woman, the standard image that they put out there, is going to be a white woman who's physically fit. The overweight or clearly undesirable white women, they're going to be put in the minority. See, the dominant society and their auxiliaries, they're covetous of their image. They make sure to protect that, and they're also psychopathically driven to control ours. As Dr. John Henry Clark said, if they can control what you see, they can control how you see yourself. And if someone can control how you see yourself, they can control what you do about yourself. About the closest, and this really is a raggedy commentary on that show, about the closest that The Real got was when they had comedian and on-again, off-again friend of Issa Rae, Amanda Seales, who was on the show for about all of 5 minutes before she left, saying that she wasn't able to say what it is that she wanted to say. And I'm not going to be calling her the second coming of Huey Newton or anything. But the truth of the matter is, whether it be from genuine disgust on the part of Amanda Seales or just sour grapes that she wasn't getting out of the show, whatever it was she thought she should get, nonetheless, she did expose some of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, and it merely confirmed what we already believe. You could look at that show and it wore its own anti-black bias like a badge of honor. The Real was as phony as it gets, and phony media requires phony legitimacy. So that's the reason why you get a Tamara Mowry who was on that show, one of the twins, as they call her. Her claim to fame is she's got herself a white husband who, by the way, is not a racist. Never mind the fact that he claimed that George Zimmerman's murdering Trayvon Martin wasn't racial. And of course, this guy worked for Fox News. And this is who Tamara Mowry decides that she wants to be booed up with. It's a classic example of where you got some racist white supremacist male who happens to have a biracial black woman as his girlfriend, spouse, significant other, and he hides behind her. In fact, he doesn't even have to hide behind her. She jumps out to intercept whatever arrows are going to be aimed in his direction. She acts as his crash dummy for him. Pathetic, disgusting, and dangerous. Not just to black people in general, but black women in specific. But the clowns over at Fox or whomever was putting out The Real, they had no problem with it. And a lot of those idiots, the Shea Butter crowd who were watching it, apparently they didn't have a problem with it either. And of course, because misery loves company, Garcelle Beauvais, she jumped on that sinking ship in 2020. And she, of course, has done the most to prove to everybody that, as far as she's concerned, if it ain't blonde-haired and if it ain't white, it ain't right. That's how Garcelle Beauvais's been. She's put that on display. What was also on display was the fact that she had picked up more than a few pounds, too. About the only person who managed to maintain a consistent weight happened to be the Asian chick, Jeannie Mai, and she had to be checked a few times because of the stuff that she says. So this show was created to basically be Shea Butter Hood Rat Zaddy worshipping catnip to the ABC's The View and CBS's The Talk. And about the only two people who the show managed to hold on to over the years was Lonnie Love and Jeannie Mai. And Love herself posted that as it pertained to saving the show, they did everything they could. That's the entire problem. They did everything they could to reinforce and perpetuate the nonsense they've been doing from the beginning. They were not on the right track. Their show was a platform for every intersectional zaddy worshiper who was trying to validate their own beliefs. And don't try to say that the show had a following or that it had some sort of value. If that was the case, they would have found another network or streamer who was willing to buy it. This is a show meant to reinforce white media narratives. It was not a white audience they were looking for. though they did want something that would not disturb white society's interests. Now, that they did want. And as with Black News Channel, there's been this persistent effort to reverse engineer a controlled group of black puppets who would present themselves as being spokesmen, or women in this case, for you and me. The white media, having selected and promoted these puppets, would then limit all their discussion to them and pretend that they are our official spokespeople. And the hope was that we would let them. It just goes to show why you need the black media. You need a media of your own, people who are speaking for you. Because on the surface, it may seem easier to tell some shill or white media puppet to change their tune than it is to create and promote our own platforms. You see, it doesn't take much effort in the moment to wag your finger at a bootlick. The problem, though, is the bootlick doesn't work for you. So no amount of chastising is going to change their behavior. And when the behavior of the bootlick or an entire gaggle of them just becomes so onerous, just becomes so ridiculous that you can't stand it anymore, and then you decide, well, you know what? Maybe some of the stuff that the black media says doesn't please me all the time, but it's a hell of a lot better than this. At least they don't come with the BS. We don't need to be breathing life into or otherwise doing anything that perpetuates any of these phony outlets. And besides, the white media money that's behind them will sooner or later get tired of propping them up. I mean, they already don't want to look at them to begin with. They didn't start these little phony sock puppet groups and shows because they like black people. They did it precisely because they're trying to distract us, and they know they can't do it themselves, so they got to get some bootlicks to go out there and be their front people for them. We starve them for oxygen. They go away. Forloni loved to be claiming that it was COVID that got them. Give me a break. If anything, COVID is probably the only thing made where they weren't canceled sooner. You got all these people who are sitting at home. Mostly you got this black female audience that they were looking for that apparently they thought they were onto. And here they are with number of time on their hands to sit at home, and apparently they don't want to watch your show. What does that tell you? That tells you that somebody else is slowly but surely beginning to get them looking another direction. And you can go ahead and bring as many Hollywood Z-listers as you want and say, oh, look at her. She was dating a white man for all of 3 weeks. That's only going to appeal to a certain segment. It's not the segment that you want. Not the black folks who actually spend money with advertisers, and not the black people who actually have real loyalty to a show that actually is operating in their interests. So the real is gone, but for any of you shea butter lurkers who hang around these parts, I know there's got to be a few of you clowns here. Don't get too sad. Actually, please be sad, be very depressed, I hope. But for those of you who are looking in the mirror now and going, whatever shall I do? Well, don't worry too much, because before long, the white media is going to be bringing along some other group of counterfeit Negroes who are going to be serving you the same garbage. So don't worry, you'll be able to get your fix of zaddy worshippers that you can live vicariously through because they got themselves some dude who worked at Home Depot or something. And you can try to pretend as if somehow that's you there. You'll be able to live vicariously through your next sock puppet in just a minute. That train is never late. But as you see that these little sock puppet organizations, these little sock puppet efforts are withering on the vine, what that shows is black folks are beginning to turn away from this stuff and tuning this stuff out. And the value that these little phony counterfeit sideshows have, that's going to be waning as well. So rest in pieces, the real. Farewell. Good riddance. We didn't know you, and we won't miss you either. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Cloudwalker Z, Timothy Smith, Justin Marcus, Larry Amayo, and Sheila Thomas. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.